I had this whole thing scripted out. I went the wrong way. And I was telling my wife about this, and she said, you just go a lot higher and a lot lower than most people. So if you imagine this going way up here and way down here, then you get the idea of the kind of roller coaster that I live with. This is a picture from 1980, and this is how long I've been wanting to do this. So this is a review of my life, and I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but what I am going to tell you is one story. And this sign has a real clue as to what happened. I've had a phenomenal life, but one of the most interesting things was when I was in the hospital the second time. I was accepted to Rhode Island School of Design, and my wife was asked to send in a $500 deposit. At the time, I was in an isolation unit and had been there for like 5 days. Carol had to send in the $500 without knowing that I'd ever get out. In fact, the doctor said that I might wind up in an institution because all the insurance money had run out. So she had the faith enough to believe in me, and that's why I'm here today. The second thing about this faith issue is in this, if I get this right, in this here portion of my life, I graduated from RISD, and we had started to develop a life together. We bought a house, we had 2 sons, and started a home remodeling business. But I'd really given up on my art because I thought that doing art equaled going into the hospital, because I never felt like doing art unless I was off my meds, and when I was off my meds, I always wound up in the hospital. So you can see the dilemma I was having. So after a hospitalization one time, my wife was, you can see she wasn't really happy about it. And I finally submitted to taking the medicine, and it left me kind of like this, real flat and not being able to do much. And what happened is I was pretty functional, except when I got home. And I was really kind of sad because I'd given up on my dream of being an artist and a teacher. And so I went to the doctor one day, my psychiatrist, and he said, no, we're going to change this. He said, he didn't say it that way. He said, I think it's time to change your medicine. And I said, why? Because I'd been on this medicine for a long time and didn't know any better. He said, because I haven't seen you smile in 5 years. So, well, I missed this slide. This is the one. This is my wife carrying me up to Providence after I'd had a hospitalization. But this was what it was like when I was freed from my old medication. I was a brand new me, and I felt like I could do new things that I haven't tried before. And one was to remodel our kitchen. We had bought the house 27 years ago, and I never even tried. And my wife was, well, she was on my back. And finally, I decided to do that. And I said, at the same time, I think I needed to remodel my life. So the same day that we started the remodeling, I set up a new discipline. And that was to get up every morning, to make at least one mark on a piece of paper and put a date on it. And I really had no idea that I would keep that up for 5 years or where that would lead me. But that was the faith issue, because if I hadn't started doing that on that one day, I would never be standing here. So my grandmother said that I was pretty stubborn, and I listened to a talk by Elizabeth Gilbert on creativity, and she told about how it's necessary to show up. So I did this drawing because I knew I could do it. And this is showing someone with all these frames of reference. And what I really needed to have is a lot of support. I brought these drawings into my therapist on a weekly basis. We talked about what was going on in my life, and I depend on her, my wife, my psychiatrist. I've got an acupuncturist that's great, and all my friends and family. Out of the hundreds and hundreds of drawings, these are just a few that I selected. And I figured that if I was going to look at myself, I had to take my brain apart, so this was the safest way I could do it. And this was about the limits of sight. And what I'm trying to do, I wasn't trying to do a diary. I started to look at trying to make a pictorial language so somehow I could relate what was happening to me to somebody else. And this person is so wrapped up in his own world, he can only see a little bit of the horizon, and he doesn't really understand where he is. And that felt like me a lot of times. And this one is a fella that doesn't know how the puzzle of himself fits together. And because he doesn't have a box top and he doesn't really understand how it's supposed to look. And this was someone that I met that carried her hurts on her chest. And she says she wore grief like a badge proudly on her chest. She learned and she was told that her sadness was acceptable, as if it was a right to hold. I knew I didn't want to do this because I'm just not that type of person. I needed to stay optimistic. This is another cautionary symbol. This person is so wrapped up in himself that he can't do anything. I drew myself in a battle with my emotions, and sometimes I drew it a losing battle, but I knew by just drawing these on a daily basis, I was winning the war. And this was being protected in a home while the storms of life are raging. And I had an idea that moods were like a bucking stallion, and they had to find a way to be tamed. I had a dream one day of these exclamation points coming out of the ground, and they kind of symbolized joy and happiness. And I realized that all I had to do was push away the dark thoughts. And these are those ideas. The curtain came to symbolize my inability to see the future, and the clouds were doubt, and I knew I just had to run. I called my dad one time and asked him for some advice, and he said, "Son," and he called me son because I was so bright. But he said, "Son, get to work, do something even if it's wrong." So I just kept on going. And this was I had a little fun with it. This is my simulated flight of my imagination. And I knew I had to somehow find a way to smile through all this stuff. I had ups and downs, and I'm not saying that everything was smooth, but I had to find a way to smile through it, and this was my image of that. And when all else fails, you grin against the darkness. And I think that's really important to remember to do that. A friend said that I had designed an art therapy program for myself, and what I did was find a way to remain grounded by drawing out my images. And, well, this is like it says, a dorky concession to age. So if I could summarize, what this really means is it's a matter of faith. And it's the faith that my wife had in me and the faith that I had to somehow learn to live with myself through all this. And by taking that step of being an artist, that first step, I was able to somehow sustain that work, and it's been very beneficial to me. And I think anybody that has faith enough to do something on a regular basis, using their hands or making art or whatever, has the ability to achieve things. And if that's all I have to say about that.